I said we're gonna try not to scare anyone,
it's a
Julia.
horror stream, Jacob.
I literally said we're gonna try not to scare anyone when we come in, and then you came in with a sudden noise, which scares everyone. Rachel Mays is scared. First time here. The first thing I said, the only thing I said was that we're not gonna scare anyone.
Horror.
Horror.
That's your first lesson.
I feel like you need to scoot more this way.
No, I don't
gotta
need to
scoot
do
more this
anything.
way.
Hello.
Hi everyone. For once, it's me and Julia on the class, so we don't even have to get Zoom up or anything. We're both here.
We're both here. We're both ready to teach. We're gonna vamp for a little bit so that we can get everyone in, or you know, as many people that are going to get in as possible. Y'all, what a day. What a day for a horror stream.
Yeah.
Horror class. If you're a VOD watcher,
it'll just be a normal day for you, but know that
it'll be a day.
For us all today, it was a bad day in America. And so that's the vibe we're bringing, but we're going to have a nice time in this stream though.
You know, we're not going to talk about it too much.
No.
We're going to have a good time. Talking about horror. I'm going to do my best to teach what I know about horror. I will say, you know, it's moments like this right now as we're doing
moments like this. Some people wait a lifetime.
Anyway, that, you know, you do what you can do when you can. And when you can't, you gather your energies, you have a good time. You don't have to be doing everything all at once, all the time. You know, there's a lot of us fighting for stuff, for, you know, for things to be better. You fight when you can, you rest when you gotta.
And
right
sometimes
now,
you teach a drawing class about making effective horror.
And sometimes you just do what you gotta do to get through the day-to-day. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
I'm going to be donating to take back the courts. I'm going to be donating where I can. I'm going to be spreading information. But like right now, not going to be thinking about it. Because I don't got to be thinking about it all the time to be doing the good work. Take a break. Gather your energies.
That's all we're saying about it.
That's all we're saying about it? This is going to be a fun stream.
This is a VOD that people are going to be watching a month later, and they're going to be like, I don't care about what you're saying.
That's a good point.
Anymore. What I care about is making effective horror.
Our cat is screaming. You know what? I'm vamping for a couple minutes.
The cat screaming is part of horror.
Horror! Someone said that every time I say horror like that, they think of Whose Line. That's what it's a reference of.
Julia told me this yesterday.
When Drew Carey says horror wrong, and then everyone just keeps saying horror like that.
Julia references Whose Line all the time.
The cat! Yes, I do.
So it's, if you ever are wondering if what Julia's doing is a reference to Whose Line, it is a reference to Whose Line.
Whose Line or the Mummy. That's it. Those are my
Those
two.
are the only two.
The only two things I got. So there we go.
Do you think we should get started on this bad boy?
Yeah, I was gonna wait until 3:05.
Well, it's 3:04.
That's true.
You think someone's gonna come in between now and 3:05?
They're gonna come into the stream Kramer style and be like, "What did I miss?"
They won't have missed anything.
I don't know why every time I do a Kramer impersonation, it's like I'm doing a Doc Brown impersonation. There's
some similarities there in sort of manic energy.
Yeah, the frantic energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Stream.
You gotta stop clapping. Your claps have been so loud lately.
Stream.
You got this above your head clap, and for some reason it generates like this immense
where I
volume.
gather all of my energies.
Yeah, it explodes. That's some effective horror right there.
Horror. Here we go.
Yes, I'm ready to learn.
This is going to be a fun draw class to do with you because, or draw class in particular to do with you. They would all be fun to do with you. But horror specifically, Jacob and I watch a lot of horror movies together. Jacob has a lot of thoughts on horror.
Yep.
I have a lot of thoughts of horror.
Yep.
This will be fun to talk about.
Yeah. So for any of you watching now or in the VOD who are interested in horror as a genre and like how to make it good, if you want to do like horror themed art or comics or whatever you want to do,
illustrations, creature design, we got you covered.
Hopefully this will help you avoid some of the common pitfalls.
Yes. Exactamundo. I will say some warnings. We're going to be talking about some scary themes, you know, because that's there we go. Because, you know, a lot of horror has some crossover between real life, and that's the scariest thing of all is real life. But we're going to be talking about some of those things. I might have some gross images up there. I might be talking about some gross folks. Won't get too nasty, but there's going to be a little bit of nasty. I'm also going to have some spoilers for some horror movies, some horror games, yada, yada, yada. So those are my warnings. There we go. Some stuff I'm going to cover. In order. Rules for effective horror monsters in a story, according to me. Effective examples of good monster designs because of like context or, you know, just good design. Monsters we were scared of until we saw them. That's a common thing. That's a common thing that happens in horror stuff. Is that I'm like, the anticipation. Great. Seeing them? That's just a dude in a suit. I'm going to have some spooky comic examples. I'm going to have some spooky illustrations. And then we're going to design a gross monster. You can see at some point when I started to get very tired in this presentation. So we're going to start off strong. We'll land somewhere. Let's get into it. Here's my rules. Just my rules. These are my opinions, of course. I can only speak for myself. For good horror design in both writing and drawing. I think the thing that is most effective for me is like the anticipation of the monster. You know, like you hear so many rules about the monster. You hear tales from people, and I'm thinking of like the scariest thing because it plays off of my unique fears. Everything that, you know, would scare me the most is what I'm picturing for this creature when you've given me some wiggle room, you know? So I feel like that's why a lot of people, when they draw horror monsters, they have part in shadow. And also when you're looking at ghost photos of ghosts, I think the most effective ones are always the ones where they're like, there's a dude in this picture, and I'm like, where's Waldoing for the ghost?
Yeah.
And my brain has connected some shadows to make the face. And it give me a little bit of chills. It's because I'm filling in the information. Yeah. I have to work for it.
Yeah.
It's good. Rule number 2 kind of goes with that as a viewer.
But you got to read rule number 1 first.
Oh, sorry. The imagination of the viewer is often scarier than whatever you'll draw. That's basically what I just said. The brain will think of the scariest possibility catered to them and their unique fears. That's just a quick summary of what I just said. As a viewer, the less you can decipher, the scarier it is because your mind wants to make sense of a thing. But if it's given very little visual information, your brain won't have a lot to work on, but it'll have like just enough to lead it. And then again, you know, plays off of rule number 1, which is that it's going to be unique to the viewer.
And we got that brain thing. Humans got that brain thing where they want to see faces and everything.
Yeah.
So you can piece together just like a couple of shadows, and if it vaguely coincides with how shadows would fall on a face, our brains will make it into a face.
Yeah.
So you can get away with very little and have it appear as a haunting visage.
And this is how we came up with the crime of eyelashes on cars. Because we saw the front of a car and everyone was like, y'all, that's a face.
Yeah.
The grill, that's the mouth. The headlights of the eyes. Let's stick some eyelashes on there and just make it a face. Congratulations, we've come up with the movie Cars. Rule number 3, if you provide your viewer with rules or context and let them fill in the blanks, i.e. the consequences of like getting caught by this monster, where the monster is, their fear comes from them, which is the scariest place. These are all like related rules to me. I love, but the scariest monster to me, and I didn't include him in this presentation, is I was so scared of the movie Creep. That's what it was called, right?
Yeah, Creep with that guy in it.
Yep.
Whose name I'm forgetting. Mark?
Zuckerberg.
Nope. Mark?
Jacobs.
Shit! You keep talking, I'll look it up.
Okay. The movie Creep is a movie about this guy who gets hired to film a man who wants to make a last message for his kids because he's dying.
Mark Duplass.
Mark Duplass. So he wants this guy, this videographer, to film him in his last moments for his child. But he keeps like, so the guy arrives, and then the guy who hired him, the dying guy, keeps like stalling. And no one ever says that this man is dangerous, but you get it. You get it because he's doing that thing where you go, dangerous or just weird.
Yeah.
You know, you've had at least one encounter like this where you've met a stranger and you're like, is he dangerous or is he just a weirdo? And I feel like it was so effective because you are trying to figure out if this man is dangerous. And they keep like saying like, yes, he is, and then pulling it back. Like, no, he's just weird. No, he just doesn't know some social norms. No, he just doesn't know this, that, and the other thing. So the whole movie, I was really freaked out because I empathized with the main character who was like, well, I don't want to come out as like super aggressive and be like, you're dangerous, I have to leave.
Yeah.
But also, there's a high possibility that he's dangerous and you have to leave. So that guy is so scary because also his delivery is like wonderful.
Yeah, it hits that very real feeling of like you wanting to be the person who's upholding the social norms,
mm-hmm.
and also not wanting to like jump to conclusions.
Yeah.
It's like Bad Vibes, the movie.
Yes.
But it's like I can see myself in that situation doing the exact same thing the main character does, because I would be like, okay, I don't want to be too harsh. I just want to get this situation over with,
yeah, as
smoothly as possible.
Yeah.
And then be out of here.
I want there to be as little trouble as possible. So yes, so I've made a list of some of the monsters that I think have been really effective in things. So let's go through them. And they'll kind of span what we just talked about. You know, those rules. And I write about why. My favorite trope, what we were just talking about with Creep, is it only a man.
Is that a reference to the Drew Gooden thing?
Yeah, it only a movie.
It only a movie.
So I love...
Wait, I have to explain it real quick.
Okay, oh, Olive's here.
There's a Drew Gooden video where he talks about how his wife saw an ad for the I, Tonya movie, but it was like on Instagram, so it was all one word, lowercase, and she interpreted it as saying, it only a movie.
It only a
like,
movie.
Don't worry, it only a movie. And ever since then, I think about that all the time.
Yeah.
That's the end of that joke. Thank you.
Well, one of my favorite horror tropes is it only a man.
It only a man?
It only a man. So, I love It Only a Man because it's so real. It's so everywhere. As I say, his design is just a guy. We all know a guy. The threat is anyone.
Yeah.
You know, like this is a real threat that you've seen that could be people around you, that could be someone you cross paths with, things like that.
We should have called this trope the Despicable Man.
This is the Despicable Man.
Yeah.
The example I used for this is Al Marsh from It, who's Beverly's dad. And I won't talk about specifics about that, but I found that when I was watching it, that it got to a point when anytime Pennywise was on the screen, I went, oh, thank God. It the clown.
Yeah.
It's the clown.
It's
and
like,
it's not Beverly's dad.
We get the clown. The clown is a monster, and he's going to eat you.
You know, like...
But it's like the things that only a man can do are a lot more nuanced and a lot more disturbing than what a clown monster can do.
Well, because we've all read and heard stories about what a despicable man has done.
Yeah.
And we're all like, good Jesus Lord, that's awful.
Yeah.
Have you read about what a clown from outer space can do? Not much.
They can lure you into the sewers.
What makes Pennywise so scary, I think, is just the distortions they do with his face and like the distortions they do with his body, which we'll like get into later. But anytime he does something that is unnatural and it does the sudden jump cut from like natural to unnatural, like he's always like a little weird, but then, you know, he opens his mouth and it's a giant like shark mouth with a bunch of teeth. That's scary. But like he's off the screen and I'm like, whew, that was weird.
Yeah.
Al Marsh, genuinely very uncomfortable every time that man was on screen.
Yes.
Because something was going to happen and it was going to be awful. You know, we covered this. He's scary because he's a real actual threat. He's not a clown from outer space doing whatever, but a real actual man. The context makes him scary. The actions, the subtle delivery of this man is so scary. And I think Al Marsh is like scary when you start getting older. Like I think that the things, and I meant to include this too, the things that you're scared of when you're a kid are so different from when you're an adult. Like the things that scare you when you're a kid is like that scene in Pinocchio where they get turned into donkeys.
Yeah.
Because it's so sad and upsetting and it's just like so jarring because they were having like a great time, and as a kid you're like, yay, I want to rebel against the adults a little bit. And then they get turned into donkeys and it's the scariest freaking thing ever, and you never forget that scary scene. And it is really scary, but then you see it as an adult and you're just like, oh, this is just like really upsetting rather than like horrifying.
Yeah.
You know?
What scares a kid is very surface level.
Yes.
It's like something visually upsetting has occurred.
Yes.
And it has frightened me because I wasn't expecting it.
Yeah.
As an adult, what scares you is more like true horror, where it makes you not scared like, oh,
right,
but scared like, oh God.
Yeah.
like a deep existential sort of scare.
Yeah, like I was going to include as an example of a bad monster, and then I started looking at people's responses and seeing that other people were scared of it. The alien reveal in Signs, I saw a lot of people saying, oh, I saw the alien in Signs as a kid and it like traumatized me. I couldn't sleep for weeks. I looked at it as a 33-year-old adult.
Yeah,
it's just a dude doing the barefoot,
doing a little Bigfoot walk.
Yeah, the Bigfoot walk.
Yeah.
Thank you. And he's just like, "Oh hey, I'm in your driveway. Hope you don't mind." You know, but as a kid, that's like traumatizing. As an adult, you're like, "Oh, that's a dude in some prosthetics."
Yeah,
it's fine. Okay.
But when it's only a man, that's
real.
That's still scary as an adult.
Yeah, that's some real stuff. Because also, when you're a kid, when you fight. You know, when you think about characters like Al Marsh, as a kid, you have that, like, I'm invincible sort of mentality. So you're like, oh, I could fight him. I could take him. As an adult, you're like, oh, there's a lot of things that would keep you from being able to fight this man.
Yeah.
Either that he's physically stronger or circumstance or whatever. Like, you understand Beverly's position is so vulnerable. Okay. Next one is what I called Uncanny Valley. Which is when something is just a little wrong. My example for this, because it like shot my heart rate up when I watched it the first time, was the tall guy from It Follows. And I called him tall guy because As I wrote here, the It Follows summary is that you get an STD that unstoppingly follows you in many human forms until it reaches you and then it kills you. And you can't fight back. You can only pass it on to the next person. I've included Mean Girls thing because that's basically the gist of It Follows.
Yeah.
So everyone that is the spooky person in It Follows changes every time you see them, basically. Anytime they change setting, because it always presents itself as a different person. So the first time you see it and you don't really like know the rules yet, it like everything feels a little like scary, but you haven't had an encounter yet, is the
Tonka clock outside.
Tonka clock. So the first time you see the It Follows thing creature is that the main character is in school being like, huh, that was weird that guy said all those things to me and then he just like ran off. Like, that was rude. And then she looks outside and there's just an old woman slowly walking towards her from like across the school field. And it just like its eyes are dead set on, you know, the main character, and it just, no one acknowledges this old woman. No one stops. It just walks forward. And you're like, oh, that's probably the thing. And you're like, that's really creepy. And then the next scene you see it, you're like, oh, this truly will never stop.
Yeah.
When you sleep, it'll still be coming for you, all these things. So the tall guy appears right after you know the threat for sure on these creatures. So you're scared of them. None of the other characters can see this creature, just the main character. So she's crying, panicking, freaking out in her bedroom, and pissing, all that stuff. So all of the friends are like, what is wrong with you? Like, you're clearly terrified. Explain to us what's going on. And then there's like knock on the door, and there's a knock on the door, and the friends are like getting ready because they're starting to believe the main character, and they get like a bat ready. And then this girl says, oh, it's just me. So like, oh, cool. So they open the door and it's just this girl, and she's like, why is everyone freaking out? And this man, who arrives just a little too loud, he's a little too big, and he's a little too fast, stomps onto the scene on like without stopping. And the fact that he is just a little wrong from what's been established makes you scared of him.
Yeah.
Because you know he's the threat. You know, and he doesn't have human emotion, he doesn't have human expression. He's like shadowed out. He's really freakish. He has to like lean into the door, lean under the door to get in. And that, like, when you've established the rule of what everyone looks like and how everyone moves and how everything sounds, because you're like 20 minutes, half an hour into this movie.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden you have a character that is not those rules. He bends them just a little bit. And that's intimidating. Also, just his physical size. He's taller than everyone else. He's like, if he gets in there, he's going to destroy you. One, because you know the rules, and two, because he's physically that much bigger. He's towering over someone, like, an adult to a child. Like, he's just menacing. I love the tall guy from It Follows. It Follows is a great movie.
It's also like when you see CGI de-aged Luke Skywalker and The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
And you like look at him and you're like, that's not a man.
Yeah.
Like, that's not meant to be horror, but our brains are like incredibly good at detecting subtle variations in reality. So the closer something approaches to reality but doesn't quite hit it, the more jarring it is to our brains to look at. It's like when you play a game with like really good graphics, and then the characters talk and their mouth is like, nyah, 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 nyah. It like looks really bizarre. But if you watch a game where it's like cell shaded cartoon characters and their mouths are like, nyah, 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 your brain's like, that's fine. Like, it's not real
Right.
anyways, so it looks normal.
Right.
But the closer you get to reality, the more something differing slightly stands out to our brains.
Yeah.
And It Follows plays on that a lot.
Yes. Yeah.
Where it's just like, it's people, but they're doing it a little strange, and that makes it very upsetting.
Well, so spoilers for It Follows. Later on in the movie, the main character passes, let's say, this curse to someone else, and she sees that the creature is now going for this person. And so she's like, I have to go warn him. So she runs downstairs, she sprints, and the creature is just banging on the guy's door again and again and again. And she's like, don't open the door, don't open the door. And you, as the viewer, are like, don't open the door, because you know what he can do. You know what this character can do. You know this creature. And the guy opens the door, and he's like, what are you doing, Mom? And the camera flips to the mom being in the doorway, blank expression, robe open, completely nude under the robe. And just the fact that it's like his mom, nude, no expression, is so freaky. And you see it for like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And you're like, you're made uncomfortable because social norms have said that this is wrong.
Yeah.
So again, It Follows plays on just like everything being a little wrong. And it's very good. I have another example of Uncanny Valley, which is the Pale Woman from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I love the Pale Woman because she's like, again, a little wrong, but then also you look at her skin and it become a dress. That's really weird. You're trying to like, your brain's trying to make sense of like, is she wearing a thing? Is it her skin?
Yeah.
If it's her skin, that's really gross.
And
But
she's got the like exaggeration of features.
Yes.
Like, take the eyes, make them too small. Take the mouth, make it too big.
A little too smooth, a little too wide, a little like just push the proportions to a point where it cannot happen. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I have a whole slide on that dude's illustrations later because it's really good. The way that she moves in the movie as well, she like walks really slow and you're like, well, she's never gonna get me. And then you look away because you're like, I have time to think about an escape plan, and you turn back and she's right there. It's very good. She's great. Now I have what I call the looming weirdo.
The looming weirdo.
Yep. I told you I started to lose my mind while I was making this presentation. The xenomorph. So Alien is one of my favorite movies of all time. I love it. The 1979 Alien. So this is a prime example of, we know the rules of this creature, but we haven't fully seen this creature. The movie tells you all the rules and proves it. It will kill you. It cannot be killed. It is somewhere. And because you are on a spaceship in space where you cannot escape to anywhere, you will die. Because there's just nothing you can do about this creature.
Yeah, it's like the universe's most perfect killing machine.
Yes. They call him the apex predator
Yeah.
of, killing machines. It's just strong and unnatural, and you literally can't, It Follows, in theory, you could just kind of run for the rest of your life. Because you're stuck on a spaceship, you can't do that. Because the xenomorph can go in the vents, it can run around, it can do all these wild things. It's really, really great. And also, when it does appear and you see it, it's, for the most part, only parts of it. At some point, you do see the full creature, and it's, really big, and it has that, long head, and it's, this weird, unnatural shape. But when you see it in full body, it's a silhouette.
Yeah.
And it has that long tail. But you really only see parts of it. And so your brain is, thinking of all these cool things that it could be. But also, doesn't matter. Because the story has already stated and proved why it is so scary and why you should be scared of this thing. Like, it doesn't matter what it looks like. I'm scared of it.
Yeah.
Unless it looks like a dingus.
Yeah.
You know?
Sometimes that can even be scarier.
Sometimes that can even be scarier. And what I think is one of the most upsetting movie scenes, the bear from Annihilation. I'm obsessed with Annihilation. I love it. I think it's beautiful. It's also very scary. I read the book. The book differs from the movie, but the movie's very cool on its own. So if you haven't seen Annihilation, Annihilation is basically, or the movie plot is that there's this area that is like kind of foggy and it's like warped, and they keep sending people in and no one comes out, and it's like something wild is going on. So they send in this team of scientists to go in and investigate what's going on and to come back. And you know, some of the characters knew, or it's actually just the main character. The main character knew someone who went in previously, so she's going in to get him back or to see what's happened to him.
Yeah.
So they go in and they find out that something is happening in there that's distorting all of the living things that's in that space. So things are combining that shouldn't be combined. Like there's a crocodile shark, which is very fun.
It's kind of like a very uncute version of the animals from Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yep.
If that was horrific instead of fun.
Yeah. And like flowers that are part of different species are becoming one species.
Plants growing in the shape of humans.
And in the book, you find out that it's because something from not this world is trying to replicate and blend in with everything on Earth, but it only has some of the information, so it can't fully figure that out yet.
Yeah. So
there is this creature called the bear, or it's referred to as the bear, where one of the main characters in the team of scientists, again, spoilers for Annihilation, she dies to a creature. It's been a while since I've seen this movie. But another one of the team members is really upset because she thinks that the rest of the team just kind of abandoned her and left her to die. So she ties up the whole team. There's this whole interrogation thing. And just as it escalates, they hear the woman screaming, like, please help me. Help me, please. And it's a little tweaked. The voice is not fully natural, but it's like believable, you know. There's just like something weird going on with her voice. So this girl this woman who's freaking out about, you know, this woman being dead, thinks that this woman's actually alive. So because you just had a whole scene of her being like, you abandoned her, I would never abandon her. She hears this voice, she runs outside, and then you hear just bear noises and her screaming. And then you hear more, please help me, but you also hear it with like a thump. And the rest of the crew is all tied up. So you're like, ooh, dang. And in comes this bear that has part of a human's face in it that is making both bear noises and human noises. And it's because it's this thing that's trying to it's trying to combine everything that it knows. So it is a bear that is also has some characteristics of like a human, just the voice, just a little bit of the look, and it's their friend. So this scene is horrifying because the team is tied up. There's this big, huge, incredible bear that's walking into the scene that's going to heck them up. But also you know that it killed this woman because it's copied her. Yeah.
And it's constantly making the sounds that we as people associate with a person like in pain.
Yeah.
Or suffering.
Yeah.
Even though it's like divorced from meaning. Like you're hearing the sounds of human suffering, but there's not actually a human suffering. It's this like soulless mimicry of the noises that the woman did make, presumably.
Yes.
When she was killed.
Yeah.
That are just being replayed through this creature that this area is trying to like replicate what it had heard and seen.
Yeah.
And so you get this like, because instinctually when you hear those sounds, you want to be like, we have to help, or like to feel bad.
Yeah.
But it's coupled with this like beast that you're supposed to fear.
Yeah.
That is going to, you know, kill you.
Yeah.
So it's a really great juxtaposition.
And on top of that, you know that it knows those noises because it's like it is this woman's last few moments before she died. So you're hearing that again and again and again as it's just repeating and repeating. You can see it on YouTube. It's so freaking scary. And it doesn't really do much until it does.
Yeah.
You just know what it did.
Yeah, it's a really cool scene.
It's so good. And it's so big and menacing, and its teeth are there, but it's mostly scary because you know what it's done. And because it's making these sounds. It's so scary. It's so cool.
Yeah, we love the bear.
We love the bear. It's so upsetting.
We love the bear. We hate the bear.
We love the bear. We hate the bear. Let's talk about ineffective monsters now that we've talked about some good ones. Again, these are all my opinions, but I have I list my reasoning for all these characters. This is one that Jacob suggested when I was asking for ineffective monsters, and I thought it was a really good example, which is the Gatherers from Amnesia. You're really, really scared of the Gatherers the first time you encounter them. You're scared of Amnesia before you even encounter them because everything's so creepy. It's quiet. You always have this feeling of like someone's watching you, someone's behind you, you're gonna get got.
And it's really dark. And whenever you see them, the game does a very smart thing, which is that your character starts going completely insane whenever he looks upon a monster. So the game mechanics encourage you to not look at these things as much as you can, which for a large part of the game works really well. Yeah. Like you can't look at them, so you never get a good look at them. Yeah. And so they remain scary. But as you play, inevitably, eventually, you get a good look at them. And once you do, like all of the sort of tension that had been built up is now gone.
Well, like the first time you see them, you're like, oh God, it's like the manifestation of all the things I've been scared of. But because it's a video game, you're gonna keep getting got. Yeah. You know, you're not gonna have a 100% perfect run in the first time you play the game. So you're gonna see this thing a lot, and then eventually it is just like, stop. Like, just stop.
Yeah. Like, oh, here's this guy again.
Yeah.
Ruining my time while I'm trying to solve a puzzle.
I also just love the screenshot because it looks exactly like this screaming cat.
It really does look so much like it.
It's so funny. That's all I can think of now. It's just this cat being like, ah. In the same reasons that the Gatherers are not so scary after a time, is also my case for a different thing. Let's talk about this one. I forgot that I had this one first. Here's my case against the Xenomorphs. I just fought for the Xenomorphs. Now I'm going against them. Because in the movie Aliens, which is the sequel to Alien takes place on that spaceship. You have a crew of like 5 or 6. It's very spooky. It's Ripley against the world. Ripley and Jonesy against the world. No escape. Then you get Aliens, which is Ripley gets woken up. She gets a job as basically a forklift. I realized I wrote forelift. I've started to lose my mind somewhere down the line. You also spelled
Ripley wrong.
Yeah, I sure did.
Get Ripley on a forelift.
Get Ripley on a forelift. No. The Aliens, the Xenomorphs in Aliens, which is directed by James Cameron. David Cameron.
I don't think David Cameron directs many movies.
Oh, God. Okay. James Cameron. they are so easy to kill. There's a whole scene where there's like a ton of them in a hallway, and one of them takes out a Gatling gun and just like goes back and forth, and they just pop. There's another scene where they just hit him with a car. They just pop. They're like freaking balloons, right? They're useless. They're pointless. All of the rules that we learned, no longer effective because they didn't keep with those rules. I'm not scared of these things anymore. I'm just like, oh, there's a lot of them. Yeah. You know, it's an action movie. It's not a horror movie. So, I guess you're not meant to be scared of them, but they do, like, in the beginning, Ripley's like, no, I'm never going back. I'm never going back. And then they drag her back, and she's so mad about it. And she's like, we're all gonna die. And then you see them, and you're like, what the hell are you so scared of? That's stupid.
Yeah, you just shoot them.
Just shoot them. It's whatever. So, I don't know.
So it takes them from so scary to not scary at all.
Yeah. And I have to say, I love both Alien and Aliens. Alien is one of my favorite movies. Aliens is just fun. It's just a good time. I just love to see everyone go badass mood against the xenomorphs. It's, you know, it's whatever you can do. Here's my other argument against the xenomorphs. The xenomorphs in Alien Isolation suffer from the same thing that the gatherers in Amnesia suffer from.
It's also a video game, this one.
Yes, this one's a video game. So in Alien Isolation, the first few times you encounter the xenomorphs, you're terrified. Because it just equals game over. And a lot of the times you don't see where they're coming from because you're trying not to, like, you're trying to hide and all these things, and then all of a sudden they just snatch you up and you die. The problem is that I was bad at the game for a long time. So after a point, xenomorphs just started getting me, and I was like, well.
You once again get the this guy again syndrome.
Yes.
Of instead of being like, oh my God, I have to hide, I'm terrified, you're like, oh, it's this guy again.
It basically just
Here to impede my progress once more.
Yeah, it's the cinematic that happens before the game tells you game over. Or like, would you like to reload your save?
Yeah.
Like, it's no longer like a creature, it's just like an annoying, like, oh God, I gotta do it better next time.
Yeah.
So, there's that, like, don't show it so much, or like don't show your creature to a degree where it's lost the effect. Use it in the most effective times. Is my case for that. So let's talk about effective comics. Comics. Again, as you can see from my previous slide, I started losing some steam, so I apologize with my lack of examples going forward. But I think these are all very good examples. Emily Carroll. If you don't know who Emily Carroll is, ooh dang, pick up her books. I was looking to see if her book was over there, but I think it's on that bookshelf.
Yeah, I think so too.
Emily Carroll is an amazing illustrator and comics writer and artist and maker and everything. She's like someone that I really look up to for inspiration in I don't know, just writing style and how she presents a monster. She loves to do contrasts, I think. You know, there's a lot of stories of like people who are just doing their best to live in this tiny village in the woods, and oops, something's in the woods. But they're really calm about it, and the fact that they're really calm is really eerie, I think.
Yeah.
You know, where there's like someone who lives in a house and something's happening around the house and that person is trapped in there. And they're just trying to do their best to survive, basically. But they treat it so normally. So there's a contrast between like the situation and their reaction that makes it really upsetting. She does that a lot, even with her art style, where she'll have black and white illustrations and then just a splash of color to to really jump out. Like she uses everything so sparingly. And I think that's really effective. She also does a reverse where she is like a really horrific person in a beautiful setting. And everyone a lot of the times just treats it as like completely normal, and that's really weird. Or they present as just like a normal person, but then they do all these like horrifying, monstrous things, and it's really good. I really like this page. Wouldn't it be nice to have an edge? Because the contrast between this, like, what's the meme Karina's always sharing? Don't you ever just want to, aren't you tired of being nice?
Yeah, don't you just want to go ape shit?
Don't you just want to go ape shit? That's basically what this illustration does. And it's like these two very pleasant people, and you can't even see this dude's like full face. So that's scary because you're wondering what the rest of him looks like. But is it even important? Who knows? And she looks so happy and all these things. And then contrasted with, you know, what he's saying or this person's saying. It's good. Of course, I had to talk about Junji Ito. I just have to.
Yes.
I've never read anything by Junji Ito. I'll be real with everyone. Because I do not... As much as I draw a lot of weird and creepy things on Drawfee, I don't like body horror. It's just... I don't know. I kind of just go, ew, gross. And then it just doesn't stick with me. I'm just like, I just don't want to look at it.
But when you see this image, it does stick with you.
Yeah, yes. I think Junji Ito's the best at body horror because he kind of ties it in with the story, and like it's almost like a slow decay, I think.
Yeah, depending on the story.
Yeah. And I think what makes it really effective is also, you know, pairing it with his stories. I think what really sells his horror is that he's really knowledgeable about the human anatomy. And so he knows how to twist it and make it unnatural and lean into it. And it's I love looking at every still image of his out of like I respect this is gross, but I don't want to look at it anymore. And that's ultimately, I guess, proving that it's horrible or horrific. Yeah. I don't know. You've read Uzumaki, I think, right?
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on it?
I mean, it's mostly like the transformation of the mundane into the horrific.
Yeah.
Where it's like, this is happening to people, but it's also happening to them like willingly. Mm-hmm. Like the people in the town become obsessed with spirals.
Right.
It's like a curse of some kind. Mm-hmm. And so like this dude who you see here has like, he did this to himself.
Yeah.
Like somehow. Mm-hmm. Good luck figuring out how he did it to himself. But like the people become obsessed with spirals and then want to manifest themselves as spirals. And so it's a horror of like, similar to like, you know, everyone knows the Amigara Fault comic. This is a hole that's made for me.
Yeah.
The horror of like the average person doing something horrific to themselves.
Yeah.
Is really scary because it's like what happens when you like lose your agency. Like this isn't being done to you. Something cosmically is making you want to do this to yourself, which like you can sort of imagine, like if you get in that headspace,
right,
of like what must it feel like to be like, I am filled with the unearthly desire to contort myself into a spiral shape,
right,
which definitely ups the horror because it's people making this choice to do this.
And I think like the relatable part is that everyone can relate to having a time where you're just like kind of obsessed with the thing. And you know that feeling, that like almost manic feeling of like, I have to get the thing or I have to do the thing. And this is just like pushed a little too far again to, it is unnatural again that this obsession has been pushed to a point where people are doing this to themselves.
Yeah.
So I think that's really interesting. And also just like, I think my favorite horror is the ones that play on a very simple feeling that I've experienced, but is pushed to a degree that feels like, ooh. That's why like Creep freaked me out so much. A scene that I don't think I'll ever watch again, and I think this is just me. In the new Halloween movie, Jacob and I went to go see it in theaters, and there's this...
Not the latest one.
Oh, no, sorry. I forgot there was a newer one. But there's...
The like original reboot.
Yes, the original reboot. With gray hair Jamie Lee Curtis. So there's a scene where the two reporters the whole time are just like, oh, we'll do an interview with Mike Myers. This will be fun. I love to interview serial killers and people who are off their rockers. Yep. Then Mike Myers like kind of escapes at some point, and then these two reporters get trapped in the bathroom, in like the gas station bathroom with all the stalls. And Mike Myers is there. He comes in and he just starts like taking them and bashing them into a wall and just like beating the bejesus out of them. And I was so like, I knew they were both going to die because it's Mike Myers and it's Halloween. And also these two characters are so throwaway. But the woman being like in the stall, like I think the part that makes it scariest for me is like hiding in the stall, hoping that whatever danger will pass. Have I been in a bathroom with a serial killer? Probably not. Not one that was actively killing someone. So that's not something I relate to, but just like that feeling of like, oh God, just leave. Just like move on.
Yeah.
I relate to that so much. And then it's worked out for me, but it did not work out for her.
Yeah.
And that scene upset me so much because I'm always rooting for the person who's so much smaller and weaker and so scared versus this like giant hulking monster. So I think, you know, it scared me so much because I know that feeling.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that Junji Ito loves to play on, is this feeling of like obsession becoming true obsession to the point of body horror.
Yeah.
Which
totally.
is cool. Monster. The manga Monster, or the anime Monster. It's basically about this doctor who saves the life of a man, and then it turns out that that man is a serial killer, and like a horrific one. The serial killer is this handsome, likable, really intelligent man who kills people in just like really brutal ways.
I haven't read it.
We watched it.
We watched one episode of Monster.
We watched a few episodes.
But I have not seen the entirety of it. So I really don't know the details.
But he basically just makes his victims suffer to the point where like the victims kind of give up themselves. So it's really interesting. Also, Rachel brings up a good point in the chat, going back to our Halloween talk, is like, and I'll touch on this later. The other thing that's so horrifying about that bathroom scene is that like the bathroom's supposed to be like the safe place. You know, as a kid, it's like the place that has a lock on it. No one's going to disturb you because it's like your private time and no one wants to interrupt someone who's pooping. So it's your safe place. It's comforting. And then someone's invaded that comfortable spot, you know?
Yeah.
So there's that as well. And again, I'll talk about that later. But so Monsters, I think what makes Johan so effective is that he's so like, he is so brutal and disgusting as a human, but he is so calm and cold and unnaturally, like, he doesn't behave like a human. He behaves like a monster.
Well, he's just an actual representation of like a real life sociopath.
Yeah.
Like, it's scary
or psychopath,
because there are people that exist in the world that are like this
Yeah.
in real life. It's like not like a fantasy, you know?
Yeah, like he has no empathy. He takes no, like the only thing he takes joy in is killing people, if anything. Like that's the closest he ever gets to experiencing an emotion is from killing people. And having control like this. Like he's just like a complete literal psycho. And it's really interesting. And it's also interesting to see, like, I think also what makes it effective is that you're seeing this perspective, or like you're seeing this guy kill all these people knowing that someone kept him alive unknowingly, like not knowing that he was like this. So you feel a lot of guilt for, or empathy towards, the doctor who saved him, because he didn't know. And if you were in that position as like a surgeon, you just, you know, it's kind of just, you operate on people. Your goal is to save everyone that, you know, that winds up on your table. And it turns out to be this horrible person, and this doctor knows, and he finds out.
Well, like in the story, the killer is a child when the doctor saves his life.
Mm-hmm.
And the doctor saves his life against orders.
Yeah.
So the doctor's presented as a hero who defied orders to save the life of a child.
Yeah.
Loses his job, gets discredited over it.
Yeah.
And then come to find out the child whose life he saved grew up to be a serial killer.
Yes.
So there's a horror in that too. A horror in, you know, thinking you're making the right choice,
mm-hmm.
and it turning against you later.
Yeah.
Or realizing like what, how you can never know what your
mm-hmm.
choices will impact in the future.
Yeah. Let's talk about, I was going to have a bunch of illustrators for this, but a lot was happening. Effective illustrations. My favorite example for a spooky illustrator, we talked about him earlier, Stephen Gamble. He's the dude who did all of the art for Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. He's wonderful. He does like almost surrealist pieces. And what I like about his work is that it's so soft and clean, and not everything has a line. Actually, there are no lines, really. Like, he just plays on light and shadow, and there's a lot of like vague areas where you're not sure exactly what's going on, but there's enough for you to get this like feeling.
Yeah, uses a lot of blank canvas.
A lot of blank canvas. Yeah, and just like also the composition and like the camera work that you do, or that he does as an illustrator, is so good. Like, I really love this first one of the Pale Woman, because it's like you were in bed and you looked up and she's like pushed herself over your, you know, headboard of your bed.
Yeah.
Or like the end of your bed, and she's like looking down, like she's just creeped up. I suggest looking into more of his work, because it's really weird. It's really creepy. Some of that I wanted to put in, but I didn't, because I felt like maybe it was a little too gross. And also has become like a horror game trope is Goya. Look up Goya's
like the
paintings.
Saturn eating his son.
Yeah, that's by Goya. But he has a lot of very gross paintings that make you feel bad.
Wasn't it called like his dark period or his black period or something?
Yeah, well,
if you look it up, you'll see.
He did a bunch of paintings. Basically, he like changed because of the Spanish Civil War.
Yeah.
And he did a bunch of paintings on that because he saw how horrific like people could be to each other, basically. So he did some paintings on that, and then it kind of like changed his perspective, and then he just did a bunch of wild paintings after that. But
yeah, his old paintings are like, here's some children playing.
Yes. And then the Spanish Civil War happens, and then he did that painting of the people being shot.
Yeah.
And then it was just all dark after that.
Yeah.
So his paintings are varied, but His horror paintings are really good. Again, I just didn't put them here because I thought maybe they would have been a little too much for people. So you can look it up. So let's talk about making an effective monster design. And these are kind of my thoughts on it. I know that a lot of people will probably think of some Drawfee drawings I've done of weird creatures. But I got to a point in this presentation where I was like, nothing's scary. Everything's the same. But this morning I wrote down some rules for when I'm trying to think of actual spooky illustrations that I do on my free time. And then we're going to draw a spooky monster here today. Using some of these rules. Yada, yada. So these are the things that I like to ask myself if I'm coming up with an illustration. I think that I still think of art as an illustrator. And I think that's fair, as opposed to like a comics artist or like a character designer.
Yeah, you have an absolutely illustrator-centric approach, I would say.
Yeah. So I try to think of like the whole story or I try to answer these questions. A lot of what I do on Drawfee, when I draw something that's like really gross, I only started doing that because I would follow like Nathan, who was drawing like nice fun stuff, and then Jacob, who would do these like really satisfying nice big shapes, and it was all like pleasant, and I just thought it would be really funny to just switch it. And basically my goal for a really long time was to just get like a horrified reaction from the rest of the team.
Yeah. Or
like a kind of freaking out reaction, which is why the Thomas the Tank Engine episode is one of my favorites.
Right.
Because it's Tristan panicking and you refusing to look at the screen for a little bit.
Yeah.
But here are my rules for when I'm doing an illustration. What does your monster represent, if anything? Is it like a childhood sort of fear? Is it sort of this like powerlessness? You know, whatever it is, what does it represent, if anything? If you want to do something that's body horror, that's like Junji Ito, do you know how to draw those nitty-gritty details? How can you look up enough reference, or where can you find the reference to sell it if you want to do this like detailed body horror? And I think that the way to do body horror is to be detailed, because you want your audience to like not have that brain leap of like it is a cartoon style.
Yeah.
But instead be like, this is a representation of a real person. And then like, how can you fudge it effectively? You know, and that's a lot of push and pull. But we'll get into that. What makes you comfortable and how can you flip it? Is it appropriate here? Things like personal space. Can you, like, you know, if you... A big thing for me is that I like personal space, and I hate when people whisper in my ear. I hate it so much. It really freaks me out. I just don't like the air in my ear, and it's just like people are too close. So a person that's like too close to someone's ear is such like a trope too, but like a really effective one. And that invasion of personal space of just like, the social norm is you give people a little bit of space, maybe a little bit more now in times of COVID, but you still have that personal space bubble. If you invade it, ooh, I don't like it.
Yeah.
Ooh, I don't like it. I'm going to do my illustration on that, you know. Can you have a viewer surrogate here to show how it feels to be near this thing? So, you know, this invasion of personal space you could portray as the camera being too close to a person's face. You and I were just watching a show And they kept cutting between like the two people who, you know, were the focus of what we were watching. And I just kept feeling like, and we didn't talk about this when we were watching it, but I kept feeling like the camera was way too close to the couple's faces. And it was making me uncomfortable because I was like, back up, back up, back up.
And what were we?
We were watching the Doghouse UK.
Oh, okay.
And there was that couple that was getting hairy.
Yeah.
And it was like their excited reactions, but like having the camera be that tight around their face made me feel like I was up in their face.
Yeah.
And I wanted to back up.
I gotcha.
So I was getting really uncomfortable. So that's how you could show it without an audience surrogate. But what you could also do is have an audience surrogate where, you know, the character's there, either they're facing away or they're facing towards us. And the person is just like right behind them, you know, and again, we'll do some drawings in a moment. So I'll do an example of that. But, you know, that's an example. You can do, are you trying to go for something that's like a little unnatural, that sticks out a little bit too much? Or something that, again, is like Junji Ito, where he really leans into unnatural, where like, you know, the body is, you know, spiraled, like it's so gross because you start to like feel it in your back because you can't bend like that.
Yeah.
You know, if he was twisted the other way, it would just be like a really kind of funny fetal position that just keep going.
Yeah.
But I think twisting backwards, it's a
little more visceral.
It's a little more visceral because you can't do that. But you can like kind of feel your back arching to try and like do that a little bit. Or do you want to go only slightly unnatural? Somebody who's a little too big, a little different from everything else. That's one of my favorite things, is just like the little bit different in the scene. If you're designing a monster for one illustration, you have to have the piece read without words, so you have to kind of most of the time meet familiar with unfamiliar, because you need the rules to say, you know, this is grounded in a very familiar, like, you know, the setting. And then here's the spooky thing. Like, I love to do a scene where there's a lot of people and they're all having a really great time and they're all talking to each other and they're all looking off in different directions and they're interacting with each other in the piece. But then you have like one character that's interacting with you, who's staring right at you, who has a different expression than everyone at the party. And the line of sight on this character is just way too clear.
Yeah.
That's always like one of my favorite things to do in illustrations. It's so good. Twist the things that you know and take comfort in. I put kind mom figure. I was thinking of something very specific this morning when I wrote this.
Well, I know in a lot of horror things, they'll use the sort of perversion of a parental figure as an element of horror, because it's a really easy way to say, this is something that you're supposed to trust. Yeah. And know and love and represent safety. And so similar to the dude from It earlier. Yeah. When that is like twisted, it can be incredibly upsetting. Yeah.
Or like oh my god, what's that manga about the kids that are being raised for the
Promised Neverland?
Promised Neverland. There's a mom character where you're like, something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
And she's very pleasant design, but then with context, horrifying. Twisted. Doesn't really do the things that you associate moms with usually doing. Also, in the chat, Zandrubert correctly says Coraline's other mom. Yeah. It's if you want effective monster designs, look at Coraline. Just a little too big, a little too spidery, a little off, but not that much off, just a little bit. It was a really good example. Alternatively, you can go with wildly unfamiliar and focus on mood, lighting, and textures. I think you can do wildly unfamiliar because there's nothing for your brain to grasp onto, which is, I think, harder to do, because now you're playing on just like Because now I think when you do something that's wildly unfamiliar, you really have to push it into very wildly unfamiliar. Like, I was going to say Cats 2019.
That's not wildly unfamiliar.
But I think it is familiar. The only problem is that, and I think this is why this movie freaked me out so much, is because all the scale is weird. So it's familiar, but wrong. But with wildly unfamiliar, I don't know. There's a lot of like trippy scenes and things where you can't really grasp like what's happening or what's going on. And I think you just have to not let your audience have like a home in there. It has to be all, off the deep end. It has to be all really weird. If you're designing one for a comic, again, what does it represent, or what role does it need to fulfill? Again, I'm going to use Emily Carroll. Emily Carroll has a lot of just people. It only a man.
Yeah.
But it only a man who have too big of a smile or is reacting inappropriately to the scene, and that's a lot of for monsters. Or like a lady who's biting through someone. That's a lot of Emily Carroll as well. Just like the unnatural things that they do. I think it's really good. And they all represent something in the story. Like Emily Carroll has a story about a guy where the whole town loves his brother. So one day he kills him and buries him in the woods. And then a couple of days later, the brother comes back.
Yeah.
But it's not the brother.
Yeah.
It's something else. It's really good. It's a really good one. Is that in the Woods one?
I think it is.
Yeah. It's a very good comic. I suggest everyone read Emily Carroll if you're interested in horror writing and horror designs and horror art. Let's draw.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what I was saying before about, the trope of someone being too close. I'm going to do a little thumbnail here. So, basically what I meant by that one, by someone being a little too close with like the audience surrogate, I think you can combine it with, like you have like a person here. Also, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them. Jacob will pick them out of the chat, or anything they want me to try and tackle. I don't really know, I think, a good way to explain horror things, because I think it's so dependent on the viewer. Some things are scary to some people or not scary to others.
Yeah, that's true. But I think there's lots of universals.
Yeah.
And you're often trying to like be relatably frightening to as many people as possible, since nothing is universally scary. But there's a lot of things that like we as humans experience near universally,
right? That
you can play upon.
Well, like being powerless, I think, is a very common like fear of people.
Yeah, that's
like,
a really common one.
Being in a situation where you can't.
I mean, I think there's like the type of horror that comes from like zombie movies, like outbreak movies. There's like societal collapse horror.
Right.
Which I think is pretty understandable why people would be horrified by the idea of society collapsing. And also you're constantly in danger.
Yeah.
You're being hunted, essentially. There's that whole sort of genre like the, A Quiet Place and Bird Box and ones where they're like, there's a thing that's going to kill you if you do a certain thing.
Yeah.
There's a horror of that, like having some sort of basic fundamental part of being a person become an element of horror. Like if you make a noise, it will come and kill you.
Right.
And you think of all the ways you could make a noise.
Yeah.
And then that's very scary. Or in Bird Box, it was like, what, you can't look at it?
Yeah.
So it's like if I had to go out without my sight and I couldn't open my eyes no matter what, even though the thing is trying to get me to open my eyes. Very scary premise.
Oh, yeah, that brings up a good point. Something that I found not scary until it was scary. It's called Outlast, where you're the dude who goes into the asylum with the camera.
Yeah.
So the part of that game that I found really scary is that at some point you drop your camera and you have been using the camera for like 7 hours at this point to look at the world, to light up scenes. It's basically, you've been looking through it because it has night vision. Then you drop it and you lose it. And that is so scary because now you can't see anything.
Yeah.
Like your crutch has been taken away. You can't, like, things are going to be significantly harder for you now because the thing that you've taken comfort in unknowingly is now taken away.
Jamie found the comic. It's called Face All Red.
Thank you. Yes, it is.
And has linked it in the chat. So if you're a VOD watcher, you can Google Emily Carroll, Face All Red.
Yes.
Excellent comic.
Excellent comic. And it's also part of a longer comic or a series that she did.
A collection.
A collection.
Ryan V said, one thing that Julia does that I like but can be effective at presenting an unsettling image is over twisted body or neck. If you have time, could you give us some tips on how to do this effectively?
Absolutely. I just want to finish this one. So something that I really enjoy as a horror thing is the character or the audience surrogate not looking at the thing that like is looking at them, because it almost implies that they can't see it, or maybe it's not there, or
well, this is like
maybe it's too late.
The exact scene from Insidious.
Oh yeah,
where they're at the table and they're doing like the seance thing, and the camera like flicks back to the woman and the demon is like right behind her.
Yeah.
Very, very close. Once again, like you were stressing.
Mm-hmm. Just like we are close on this character. The combination of being close up on this guy and something being close up on him, like us being close to this guy's face, emphasizes the feeling of this thing also being close.
Yeah. And it also gives a claustrophobic feeling of not being able to perceive your surroundings as the viewer.
Yeah.
Much as the character is not perceiving their surroundings.
Yeah.
Anytime you can use framing and composition to make the viewer feel what the character would be feeling, that's a good thing. A good impulse to chase.
Mm-hmm. So like this is so scary because also like this direct eye contact when you're so close. Like think about any of the times that like a friend has gotten like really close to you and makes direct eye contact and you're like, stop.
Yeah.
Like it's that. Like that makes you uncomfortable. Push that a little bit further and you got yourself a horror. Like it goes from uncomfortable to horror. Okay, yeah.
And I know one thing you often do, Julia. Mm-hmm. You're a big fan of the Despicable Man genre.
I am. I love
horror.
Despicable Man.
I think it's something you did really well in your one comic about the bar.
Oh, the Matador.
The Matador, yes. I wanted to say the Lion Tamer, which is
close.
kind of like thematically close to the Matador.
A little bit.
Where that sort of like final splash image of the guy in the bar with his face like partially obscured.
Yeah.
The horror, the normal horror of there's a bad man, especially when you're a woman
Yes.
and there's a bad man, it's a very specific type of like vulnerable horror.
Yeah.
That I think you do very well.
Thank you. I really like to do sort of like vulnerable, relatable horror, and I think that, you know, I was about to say like a lot of women, but I think that a lot of people in general have all met someone who's just like, you read and you're like,
Sticky keys?
Sticky keys? What the hell?
How dare you?
How dare you do this thing? The sticky keys thing came up on Jacob's screen. But I think that playing off of, again, a common fear and saying, you know, this thing that everyone says is scary and you've had like slight experience in being scary, but it actually being real and happening. There's like that presentation of like, oh my God, it's actually like happening here.
Yeah.
Like this is the thing. I really like to do things like that. So twisting.
And I definitely get the despicable man angle.
Yeah.
I've had dudes at bars want to fight me because they thought I was gay.
Yeah.
So I think it's something that can apply to a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah. And I've definitely run into, you know, drunk men at parties, and those parties were like, I was in a comfortable setting where it was like a friend's party, and then one of their friends got too drunk and maybe they were like the plus one of someone else, and they just like were really gross, like, you know, playing on that experience that I had and pushing it, and, you know, what if I didn't get out of there, or what if he was just like a little bit worse. It's all grounded in a reality. Like it's grounded in an experience that not only I have experienced, but so many other people have experienced. And you just push it a little bit further.
Yeah.
And then it becomes horror, you know?
Yeah.
So twisting.
I gotta run to the bathroom.
It was like twisting necks, right?
Twisting necks and twisting bodies.
Twisting. So I think that to make effective monster designs, if you're doing like a twisting, sort of Bloodborne, Dark Souls, gross, like unnatural, like this human got pushed too far and now he's a big twisty monster. I think you have to remember the core tenets, which is like that this was a person. And so you take what you know from drawing the human body and you push it. Like if you have, I drew, okay. So let's do a face, I guess. Let's do, I'm going to draw like a person who's not really going, he's going to look very similar to the dude I just drew because I don't feel like thinking about a new character. But again, we're going to ground it in the rules of reality. We're going to say this was a guy, and you can see that it was a guy, and we're pushing it. Also, I'm sorry that my lines are like particularly crispy. The file that I'm working on is smaller than we usually work on. It's because when I was typing the text, it was not having a good time for some reason. Okay. So we want to push it. We want everything to be a little like a pushed expression, a pushed. We want to remember that humans are basically just squishy sacks of bone and muscle and liquid. You know? This eye is wrong because I decided to change the position. So everything has a roundness, has a shape. So we're pushing everything just a little bit. We're going to get all of the knowledge that we know from drawing people, and we're going to include it, you know, like sagging a little bit, and like the pulling. You want to take what you know about, you know, what grosses you out on a human body and push it. What's a little like, you know, what your skin and your body can generally do, and you want to make it pushed a little bit. So you want it to be maybe a little droopier, or maybe a little wrinklier, or like just really have it get pushed. I think I'm gonna do like a little.
This is Lex Luthor.
It is Lex Luthor. Except he's going to be...
That face when you see Superman.
And he's undoing your plans yet again.
And he's undoing your plans yet again.
No, I think I want him to be like Dark Souls, sort of like monkey guy, since we're talking... Dark Souls is medieval-ish.
Sure.
I mean, it's like knights and...
It reminds me of the monks from Sekiro, who like worship the insects.
Yeah.
And let the insects go into their bodies.
Ugh, yeah.
And become insectoid in various ways.
Yeah. Blah, blah, blah. Gross.
That's good horror too.
That is good horror.
I thought those Sekiro insect monks were really effective.
Yeah. Okay. So, why would he be twisting? I guess it doesn't matter.
This is freaking Jimmy Jam.
This is Jimmy Jam. Make his hair a little bit pointier.
Someone had mentioned that in chat earlier as another good example of horror.
Oh, yeah.
That was just a man.
He only a man, but he's missing some things that make him human. He's grounded in something we know, but is doing something we wouldn't expect and unsettles us. Okay. So if we do like twisting, so like a neck, you know, for like a dude neck, you have like the Adam's apple, you know, you would be like this. So then you get the back of the neck, which would go into like the trapezius, and then it would connect to the collarbone. Then you get this muscle, which I always forget the name of, that helps you turn your head. When you turn your head sideways, you get this long, straight one. You know, I've made them really wide, but that's okay. Because what we're going to do is we're going to think about, if we're twisting his neck, we're going to think about we're not going to think too heavily on the construction of the neck, because we're throwing that out the window. This guy has an unnatural twisty neck. What we're going to think about is what would show if you were to, if it were physically possible to take a neck and to twist it. You want to think about maybe like a really thick towel, and you want to like bunch it up and then turn it. You're going to get all of these, like, you know, that's going to represent your skin basically. So if we want him to be kind of like, if we want him to be kind of like hunched over, ooh, we coming to get you. He's about to wrestle you.
This is a wrestling pose.
If we were to have him be like hunched, we want to push that hunch. We want to push his like, ooh, he coming energy, right? We want to think about basically, we want to think about the shape of the neck. We want to push these shoulders a little bit. We kind of be like
this. Just doing that like thing where he's like, "What'd you just say to me?"
What'd you say?
His head just goes. Rip.
So,
say that to my face.
So there's parts where the skin will get And again, you can see this on the towel, or you can see this on, I don't know, whatever. There's parts where it'll be taut and parts where it'll bunch up. So you want to have, and there's like a lot of stuff under that skin. And remember that skin has some thickness to it. So, you know, maybe start with like, again, something we know. So like the Adam's apple, right? Then you have like, you want to think about those are some basic, like, if we're thinking about the construction here, if you're thinking about the shape of this, like a tube, right? Basic shape. We want to break it down a little bit. So like, it would go around. It would be made out of these like rings. And then, the base here, right? And then they're just like connected. So you want to generally think about the form, because what you want to do is have enough grounded in reality and skewed so that you like see what's going on, but it's wrong and bad, right? So we'll think about some of the wrinkles that happen here. Like, you'll start getting like, your skin is going to stretch. Like, think about, like, use your own, body. If you like start to turn like, some of like the meatier areas of your body, like your thighs or your forearms, or, or you can even like twist your neck a little bit without hurting yourself, and you can see like what it starts to do. You're gonna get all of these like little wrinkles, and you want to push some of that depth. You want to make the skin act like it would if this were possible. So, and you have to think about how it's moving. You want it to have that depth. You want it to go under the previous fold, because that's how it would work.
Yeah, it makes you start like feeling it when you look at it.
Yeah, because again, you want that like Junji Ito, that like visceral reaction of like you feel it, And again, this is like a very quick example, but and then something that I like to do when I'm drawing horrible, disgusting necks, let me get that trapezius back in, is sometimes to really show the depth of a thing that's twisting. Sometimes I like to stick things in there. Like maybe this guy twisted his neck like this because of some, again, if we're talking Dark Souls or Bloodborne or something, maybe he was twisting, maybe they had like an obsession with something that would twist and bend. And elongate. I'm thinking about the early Thief games, and they had that whole faction that was obsessed with like industrialization.
Mm-hmm.
And they viewed industrialization like a religion, like everything should always advance, and mechanics and springs and things. So maybe this guy has an obsession with, mechanics, and maybe he wanted to be, robotic like. So maybe the thing that he was using to stretch himself is like metal. So we would have kind of this maybe he kept using like a coil.
Like some of the wires are still in there.
Yeah, like he literally put like a spring in his neck to push his head constantly. And if he's pushing his head all the time, we'll have it maybe dig in to his, maybe we'll have it like dig into his, maybe it's like a cheek thing, you know, and we want to show that depth of it. Like, think about what it would be like for this piece of metal to go through and in, and maybe it's like,
Yeah, it's pretty nasty.
right, so you would, and it's like slowly made its way in, maybe, so it's like you have this slow dent, and we're going to do all these extraneous lines to show like how the skin would push before it was slowly punctured and still keep pushing. And again, like, push your own face, see what's happening there. See, you get this like shadow, this depth here, and then you get like this other side where all your skin's being pushed around. So it'd be like, we'll show some depth with some shading. How you doing, Jacob?
I'm good.
Yeah?
Just watching the process here. I feel like it's good advice to always think about in like your horror character designs like you would in a normal character design. Like, what's the motivation?
Mm-hmm.
What's the reason behind why they're like this, like you're doing?
Yeah.
And then to include those elements in the design so that it tells a story just to look at the creature.
Yeah.
It's not just like, oh, it's a monster. It's like, there's some unique things about this monster that make me think, you know, that give me clues as to why it is this way, or what it wants, or what its desires are, all that stuff.
A good character design tells the story of that character. So, you know, this one says, you know, the goal of this horror monster would be to sell, maybe it's like coming down because it's bunching up over it, is to say this man obsessed with the machine.
I feel like where we're at right now, and this is something we can address in the design as we go, is that, and these are the kind of questions you could ask yourself if you were designing a character like this, is like, at this point, it's hard to tell if this was done to him,
right,
or if he did it to himself. And so maybe some element of intentionality, like if he's got, you know, and this could be like in part of the rest of the design, like maybe he's got like a crank that he's like occasionally like cranking to like make it happen more.
Yeah.
Maybe he has like, you know, symbols on him or something that represent whatever sort of cult he's a part of, that something that tells you that like he did this as like, that's what makes it scary, is that he did it.
Right.
And maybe he wants to do it to you also.
Right.
He wants to convert you.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe he has some like, because this also adds to like a claustrophobic sort of feeling if he has, maybe it's like, you know, machines cannot speak and we must be more like the machines, like they're taking the wrong messages out of these inventions, you know.
Yeah. And
I always like to put in shadows to really sell the depth of things and to sell turns and textures. So I'm just adding it to, you know, make like the wires pop and to make the angles pop and to give it some drama, like especially when it's so harsh like this. Maybe he's gonna be wearing like. Would he be wearing a shirt? Yeah, probably a shirt.
Machine don't wear shirt.
Machine don't wear shirt. Yeah, so maybe
This is something that definitely the Souls bosses and enemies do really well in their designs. That's why like years later you'll get a video that's like, we just noticed this seemingly arbitrary feature of this enemy from Dark Souls that explains like its place in the lore. It's like a good design is one that you can see and immediately be like, I'm scared and I don't like it. But then if you choose to engage with it further,
yeah,
it's all the elements of it cohere into like a pretty good picture of like what this thing is. There's like levels to how you can interact with it.
Maybe I'll have him like hunched a little bit. Sorry, I'm like, I started this character without thinking about the whole thing, and now I'm like, oh.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've just been making it up as we go along. This is not an example of how one would actually design a character.
Mostly just trying to show how I draw like necks and things. But I think it's all like, you know, you feel it because it has some grounding to it. Like, people have been talking about my Thomas the Tank Engine, you know, Cozy Coupe or whatever the heck it was called. And, you know, horrified faces, twisting, that like picture someone coming out hands first from like a tight spot, and think about how that would happen after like being stuck for a while. That like sort of crawling, you know, dragging, sort of pushing out those motions. You know, you're gonna try to get it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Do we have any more questions? Can I abandon this man? I don't really know what I want to do with him.
We don't have to continue this, man.
Okay, maybe I'll design a horror monster, like, with some intentionality.
Yeah, we could do that too. I don't think we have any other questions at the moment.
Yeah, does anyone have anything to ask me?
But
it's like,
I know, like, further, like, since this is like a draw class, further like composition stuff, I think could be helpful. Like other like scary types of compositions one can do.
Yeah, something that I like to do is the forcing you to look at a person. So if you have like 1 point perspective, I did a comic a long time ago, and I had rediscovered it actually when I was looking at old art of mine this week. I did a comic about or around the time that my grandpa died, and I had seen something really freaky in his house, and it was like creeping me out, and I made a comic about it. But it was also like a very emotional time for my whole family, and I had made a comic about seeing things in his house. But I really liked how this one came out. So, you know, 1 point perspective. And then I used some light, basically. Where I had the light of the door. What the hell? There we go. To sort of frame this like nice light area of the hallway that is in his house. He had a really long hallway in his house, and it was always so scary because the end of it was always so dark.
At my grandmother's house in Alabama, she had a long hallway, and then at the end of it was a mirror.
Oh.
And I'm like, what are you thinking?
Why?
Why would you do this thing?
Why would you do this?
Because at night, you stand at the end of the hallway and you always see something. at the end of the hallway because there's a mirror down there.
Yeah.
And if you're not thinking about it, it will scare you every single time.
Yeah.
Like, why would you do this?
So I really liked... So basically, you know, you have the light from this door coming in. And because of the 1-point perspective, it's forcing you to look at the vanishing point, which is around here, right? And there I had very softly put... you don't have the keyboard shortcut. I had put, like, as he was lit from... As he would be lit from the door, as if he were, like, almost a real person, but then also not fully.
Yeah, this is a good example of using light and shadow to create a focal point as a red herring.
Yeah.
Where, like, you're obviously going to be drawn to the brightest point first, which is the light from the middle doorway.
Mm-hmm.
But then the second thing you'll see is the slightly less bright figure of the person. And because you didn't see it immediately, it makes it a lot more, like, chilling.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you know, just like you were talking about with the ghost photos. Mm-hmm. We're like, oh, where's the ghost? Where's the ghost? Oh, there it is.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes it more scary. It's like this. It also gives the impression that this thing was hiding out of plain sight.
Or the fact that it took you so long to notice it.
Yeah.
You, like, trust your instincts to be good at catching those things, but it didn't this time.
Yeah.
What am I doing?
And so you can play with focal points like that in that way. Like, use them to actually obscure the subject. Oftentimes in, like, horror, it's more effective to obscure the subject than to fully illuminate it, like you would with the subject of a normal illustration.
Yeah.
We did have another question from Hoplite.
Yes.
Said, can you talk about using texture to increase horror?
Okay.
Wet, gristly, sticky. How would you approach that?
Okay. So I think, like, again, it's something you have to, like, push a little bit. There's a thing that's happening in video games right now where they're, like, getting too detailed. Like, the engines are too good. So now sometimes they make the eyes a little too wet. And I'm like, why? Stop it.
Yeah. Just because they can.
Just because they can. So I really like... I'm actually going to switch brush. I really like to use texture... There we go. So, like, an eyeball. Like, when you can see too much texture or the wetness of a thing, that means you're too close. Or it's standing out for a reason. I really like, we had talked about it earlier, but I didn't talk about it specifically in this example. I really like the texture of everything here, because this is like, I'm way too close and she seems so dry,
but very lumpy,
and it's like like not human.
It gives you the sense that you aren't sure what it would feel like if you touched her.
Yes, probably mashed potatoes, because she kind of looks and feels like mashed potatoes. I think a little lumpy, like
kind of reminds me of that potatoes. Like modeling clay, like white modeling clay.
Yes.
Where it's kind of like, it's not wet, but it's not dry. It's kind of like too smooth or something.
Yeah. So let's talk about eyes.
Let's talk about eyes.
So the more details you include in a thing, again, the closer you're going to feel to the person. And you've just overloaded people with information a little bit.
I've got such a case of the yawns today.
Yeah, that's all right.
I keep trying to stifle them, and they keep coming back.
Are you bored of my class?
That's what I was trying to say.
So, okay. So we can get, and I think Junji is another really good example of doing texture because he adds so many lines. There's like the very pleasant, I'm gonna pull them up. So you look at these people on the side here, and they don't have that many textures. What the heck? There it is. They don't have that many textures to them. Sure, they have like a little shading here, but that's it. This is... There's white here, a little here, here, and just like it's just the highlights. Anything else, he's filled with texture. And so, again, the rule has been set that the regular people look like this, and then everything else, you know, has too much going on.
Yeah.
And it's really effective to make you feel like, ooh, this guy's standing out, you know. I'm going to have maybe a tiny pupil. So there's a regular eye for you. Just get some eyelashes in there. There. Right? That's a regular eye. That's an eyeball.
That's the eyeball.
That's an eyeball. I'm going to pull out my favorite brush to draw anyone with. My graphite stick. I love the graphite stick. So then let's talk about texture and wetness. So it takes a lot of knowledge of whatever you're drawing to see what the wetness for the texture it's on would look like. You can always look up reference. So the eyeball, so I talked about this when I was talking about face proportions and how to draw realistic faces and stuff like that. But the center of the eye is coned downward. So this is like the deepest part. I don't want to hide that pupil. So let's do like, let's say the light's coming from this way. You get it. So since the light's coming this way, you're going to get the shadow here because it's cone. And then you would have it lighter over here, right? You also have the light that's being cast on the white part of the eye from the upper eyelid. And since it's basically a ball of wet goo, you get a little bit of, you know, it's a little bit of a shadow nightmare. Jacob, I'm ruining all of your settings. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you really are just like going through them
Blasting
like a bull in a
through them.
china shop.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
But I feel like when you're going for wetness, right, it like increases the detail of all like the light and shadow.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll have like some really like the shadow shapes of things in your environment will be present on a wet surface, unless it's like, you know, a wet rag or something. But a wet reflective surface will increase the highlights and shadows of the things in the environment.
Yeah. So
that's right?
Yeah. So like the rule basically for the eyeball is that since it's clear goo to a degree with this thing floating around in it, it's a, you know, goo ball. It's all liquid with a film on top. The light plays through it very specifically. So you get the light that would travel through to the other part of the eye, which is why you get light down here. You get that secondary light because it's traveling through the liquid and around. And also because this part of the eye has a bump on it, so it's going to throw the light a little bit. So you basically just like increase the highlights of where it naturally would be. Just push it a little bit. You know, like that looks real goopy. And then if you want something that's like really dry, you get texture in there. If you want to like draw it, if you want to draw it with a pan, you can do it Junji Ito style, where you follow the shape of it.
Like a single line hatching style.
Mm-hmm. Like you know this shape because the actual eyeball part is a ball that's sitting under the skin, and then the skin is sitting on top of that, so the skin is going to wrap around it, right? And when things are really wet, you're not going to get these like detail lines. You're going to get more light and shadow and some shininess. Like the light is going to block that detail. Think about anything that you view underwater. So like this eye looks really kind of dry. You can also like do cracks that would naturally happen and your skin gets dehydrated. Think about, look at where wrinkles are on. You can always look at extreme examples. You can look at like much older people and see where the wrinkles sit on them and then do it a little bit. I think this is usually the way that I like to do it. So, you got like crow's feet. And think about what those wrinkles are. Like it's just like sagged, thin skin. So you get these creases. Sometimes you get the extreme version of when you like a lot of eye scrunching, you get these textures. There's some actor who has these, and I love to draw him because he has this. Is it Clint Eastwood? Clint Eastwood, I think, has this. But that wasn't who I was talking about. I think I've never drawn Clint Eastwood. Oops.
So basically more detail equal more horror.
Yeah. Or if everything has a lot of detail, doing a lack of detail.
Yeah.
Like sometimes a lot of people get freaked out, without the artist meaning to, when children appear in comics, because they're not really sure how much detail to put in the kid, because they don't draw the kids a lot, because kids are so plump that they don't have like a lot of nooks and crannies and planes.
Yeah.
They're all very round. But then you have like a bunch of scrungly adults who have like, and the artist is like, I know how to draw this. I know the planes. I'm familiar with this. And then they have to draw a kid and they're like, that's a child.
Yeah.
And just the fact that they're so baby-faced and they don't have a lot of details, sometimes the audience will go, ugh.
Kind of weird looking.
In
the context.
In the context. I hope this was helpful at all. I don't know, it's hard to teach horror because it's all just like a process of how to break down what, I don't know. You're just solving for a problem that is personal to you.
Yeah.
And I think there's again universal rules that you can use that we went over. Some tropes that work, some tropes that don't.
And a lot of it, like we were saying, is trope inversion.
Yes.
Taking something common and then figuring out a way to make it wrong.
Yeah.
That's the basis of a lot of horror. Is that there's a thing here that shouldn't be here.
Yep.
And if you can get that, you can usually generate some horror.
Yeah. Just, it's horror, I think, is making people uncomfortable, but still wanting to interact with your art. So you have to give it a story enough to be engaging.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's it.
That's it. Olive is here to say the stream is over.
Olive is here to say the stream is over. Thank you everyone for coming. If you are watching this live, charity stream tomorrow. If you're watching the VOD,
we probably have a VOD of the charity stream.
We probably have a VOD of the charity stream. Thank you everyone who is present in the class for being a patron. If you liked this class and would like to ask questions during the class, consider being a Patreon supporter. We have tons of fun rewards and benefits for you to interact with. We out.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching. Be good to yourselves. Goodbye.